I literally want to cry. So if you didn't know, I have a sister, and her name's Ashley, and we both have boyfriends. And every night we both fall asleep on the phone with our boyfriends. So one day we're all hanging out and we're like just talking. And my sister's boyfriend looks at me and he's like, "You need to stop going into your sister's room in the middle of the night." And I look at him and I'm like, "What are you talking about? I don't have a reason to go into her room. Like I don't go into her room, especially in the middle of the night." Then my boyfriend hops in the conversation and he's like, No. He's like, "No, I hear Ashley go into Kayla's room every night and stare at her." So me and my sister both look at each other and we're like, we don't go into each other's rooms, do we? And we agreed that we do not. And they said this has been going on for months. So for months, somebody or something has been going into me and my sister's room for about 15 minutes every night and watching us sleep. But it only gets worse.
Story time about how a guy bothered me then got into a car accident. So basically I was just sitting in my car waiting for my food to get ready with my brother when I see a guy pull up with this car backing up to park in front of me. He backed up so fast where he almost hit my car. So me and my brother honked at him and we're like, "Yo, like, watch out. You're about to hit the car." And he gets out of the car and he's like, "I have eyes, I can see." Like, okay, you have eyes, but clearly you can't use them. So he goes inside the store to pick up his cake and my brother goes inside to pick up our food. And by the time he comes back out, my brother's not back out yet. And I wanted to honk at him and be like, "Next time, watch what you say." But he left, and then my brother came out right when he left, and he was at the light. And I was like, "Listen, we're gonna go catch this guy, and I'm gonna like beat him up." I mean, I really couldn't beat him up, but I just wanted to follow him, like give him the finger or whatever. So I'm driving, and I feel like I lost him. I didn't find him, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no!" And then I found him. I saw his car and I went after him. But like for part 2.
Last week, my 6-year-old son comes to me and says, Daddy, I saw Mommy in bed with the neighbor when you were at work." So instead of confronting her when I found out, I thought of a plan to really fuck her. So we invited all of her family over for Christmas dinner, and while we were eating, I said, "Hey, Tommy," which is our son, "how about you tell everyone what you told me a couple days ago?" Everyone thinks he's gonna...
Story time of how my parents forced me to marry a 40-year-old man when I was 14, but most people from my country, it is called arranged marriage, and it happened to a lot of girls. My family was poor, but the guy I was marrying had a lot of money and promised to take care of me and my family. He also had a 6-year-old son, but he didn't like me. I had met him once before when my mother introduced him to us. She allowed me to stay with him alone. He was very touchy. He told me I was very beautiful and would spoil me because pretty girls like me deserve pretty things. After he left, I told my parents that I was scared to marry him and that I'll do more housework and I'll take care of my other little sisters. My father yelled at me and told me no. So the next week, I went throughout the whole wedding crying. My mom told me to stop because I was messing up my makeup. After we had got married, a couple months later, he grew very abusive.
Story time about my psychotic best friend. So we're going to call this girl Gia. So a little background information. This all happened whenever I was in 9th grade. I saw Gia sitting at this lunch table alone and I invited her to come sit with my friends and I. And after talking to her, I found out that she was a new student and she didn't have any friends. So her and I started hanging out and we became really close. Like she would come over my house 24/7. Well, my older sister was a grade above us and she would act really weird around her. And by weird, I mean like she would always make fun of me in front of my sister. And weirdly enough, try to cause problems between us. My sister didn't really like her. She thought that she was weird. But because she was my friend, she was being super nice to her. Well, like a month later, she started trying to become best friends with my sister. Like any conversation she would have, I would be like, "Oh, do you want to come over?" She would be like, "No, sorry, I'm hanging out with your sister today." And I would go home and I would be like, "Hey, are you hanging out with Gia today?" And my sister would be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like for part 2.
Story time on the time I had to go pick up my sister who went to Manhattan an hour away and didn't tell my parents. So basically, my sister asked my parents if she could go to her friend's house, which was 5 minutes away. So they came and they picked her up and took her to their house. Fast forward 2 hours later, my parents tell me to pick her up and bring her back home. So I text her and I'm like, "Where are you at? I'm going to come pick you up in 5 minutes. This girl texts me and is like, "Mash, I'm not there. I'm in the city. I'm an hour away. Oh my God." And I'm like, "You stupid bitch." So I had to drive to the city, which was an hour away, and I had to drive back. And my parents told me to also get my Starbucks drink, so I had to go there on top of that. So we were freaking out in the car because my mom has a tracker on her phone and she turned it off and she called my brother, so we thought she knew. But then when we got home, She didn't know.
Hey, I can't be the only one. Who else knows people that have killed other people?
Finally, something that I can actually relate to. So my grandma killed her mom, so she killed my great grandma. It's kind of a crazy story, but back in the 90s, my grandma was over at her house giving her a bath. She was elderly, so my grandma was kind of in charge of taking care of her. During the bath, my grandma brought up the past about how she was abused as a child by one of her stepdads, and her mom then basically admitted to knowing about the abuse but blamed her for it instead of the stepdad, which sent my grandma into a rage. She ended up drowning my great grandma, and then after she was dead, instead of calling the police, she cut up her body into 8 different pieces, put them in garbage cans, filled the cans with cement, and then put these garbage cans in different storage units all throughout my hometown where I grew up. When the police were investigating, she lied and said my great grandma was in Hawaii with this wealthy man she met and even faked letters from her. It's pretty crazy.
Story time. I babysat a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and there was this one night that I was babysitting a 2-year-old. It was around 10 o'clock at night, so the kid was sleeping, and I was just sitting in the living room. In the living room, there was a big TV, a couch, and then behind me, it was a wall with a giant window. So it was really late at night, I had nothing to do, so I was Snapchatting my friends. If you Snapchat anybody, I'm sure you know that sometimes you Snapchat really fast. You don't even know or look at what you're sending. I was mass snapping all my friends, and then one of them replied 10 minutes later. And he said, "Who's that guy behind you?" And I turned around and no one was there, so I'm like, he's playing a joke on me. But then I get another Snapchat from this friend I had, and she lives all the way across the country. They don't know each other. And she said, "I think there's someone outside." So I was really freaked out because I was alone, there was a giant window behind me, apparently there was someone outside. I wasn't gonna call the child's parents because I didn't want to freak them out, but I was scared. So then I went around the house, locked all of the doors. Sorry, it's a really long story, like for part 2.
Girls, tell me about a time where your quick thinking probably saved your life. I'll go first. 2 years ago, I was walking my dog at the park and a man approached me and asked to take a picture of her. And I said yes, because why not? It's a picture of a dog. So he starts taking a picture of my dog, and then I realized that he was like holding up her collar, and then it hit me. My address is on that collar. He's not taking a picture of my dog, he's taking a picture of my address. So I told him that I actually didn't feel comfortable with him having a picture of my dog, and I asked him to delete it. So he deletes it and then like starts walking away really fast. And I was like, "Excuse me, sir, no, could you also go into your deleted album and delete it from there?" And he goes, "I don't have a deleted album." And I was like, "You have an iPhone, everybody has a deleted album, could you please delete the picture?" And he was like, "Sorry, I don't have a deleted album," and like keeps walking away. And keep in mind, this is like 2 PM in a park, like there's other people around. So now I'm like chasing after him and I'm telling him, "Sir, I know you have the album, I will show you where the album is, can you please go onto your phone so that we can delete the picture?" Oh, part 2.
Story of the time a police officer pulled me over just to flirt with me. So when I first got my license, I would always go to Wawa in the middle of the night. Usually I would pick up my friend and we would go together. But this night she was busy and I was hungry, so I just went by myself. So I pull up to Wawa and right after I got there, I see a police officer pull up. I didn't think anything of it. So I went inside, ordered my food, and while I was waiting in line to pay, I see the police officer walk in. He was probably in his late 20s, early 30s, really tall and muscular and had blonde hair and blue eyes. Just an overall attractive guy. Right when he walked in, we made eye contact. At the time, I was 17, so I wasn't thinking like, "Ooh, arrest me, officer." I'm just kidding. But whatever, I pay for my food, go to my car. Then the cop comes out a few minutes after me, and he looks at me while I'm getting in my car. And I was really hungry and not trying to wait to eat, so I watched YouTube on my phone and ate my food in my car. So I finished eating and started heading home. Mind you, there was nothing wrong with my car. I didn't have tints, all my lights were working, and all of a sudden I see cop lights behind my car. So I pull over, and it's lo and behold the cop from Wawa. Like for part 2. Crazy story time about how my sister and I found out that we were hooking up with the same guy. So I was a freshman, my sister was a sophomore, and there was this really cute guy in her grade that I liked. But I could never find a way to talk to him because we weren't in the same grade and had none of the same classes. And my sister and I were not close at all. Like, we didn't tell each other shit, we didn't really talk to each other or anything. So by that being said, we never told each other about the boys that we liked. We just didn't have that bond. Well, track season came around. So they called all the people down who wanted to do track, and I saw him walk past my classroom window, so I decided to go too. So I signed up for track, and him and I started to talk a little bit. We exchanged numbers, and he was popular, I wasn't, so he didn't want to be seen with me. So after attendance, we would go to this graveyard right by the track and hook up. Well, the next day we had a meet in our school. So him and I went to the graveyard, hooked up, and that's when it started getting crazy like for part 2.